Nearing the end of the 24th century, humanity had found themselves in a desperate search for resources, with Earth's resources becoming limited, less than they once were. Desperate to find new resources or perhaps something to plug the hole, giving the human race sustainable energy upon which they might use for their own benefits. The sovereign colonies would investigate into old research pulled up from the team at the Gulf of Mexico, in hopes of reconstructing a once lost relic, the Black Marker. The scientists had found that the marker would give out a large quantity of electromagnetic energy, and so if they could reverse engineer the obelisk, they may be able to complete the research on it. However, all that would be left are records, and the holy artifact lost, laying deep under the Gulf, on the bed of the sea. The sovereign colonies, after some time of research and tinkering, would create 3 new duplicates of the original, with their own distinct appearance. These would be dubbed the Red Markers, with Marker 3A being sent to the research station on Aegis VII, and the other 2 being taken to Crema and Asperia. The teams would be tasked with doing further research on their capabilities, their properties, and how they could be used to further humanity's civilization. These locations would be kept secret as there were talks amongst secessionists, with the plot of seizing power within the growing crisis. The only updates and reports would be sent to General Ambrose Caden while being encrypted for discretion, so the information could not be used against them if intercepted. The research team that would be expected to arrive at Aegis VII, they would not know it, but they would be traveling to a dead planet which would be made clear to them in the days to come. If only the records they had obtained told them of the dangers the markers came with, as these obelisks held a dark and grisly secret, one that would end the occupants of the station. However, what if there was another threat lurking underneath Aegis VII, awaiting them? Another enemy hell-bent on the domination of other species, one that would seek the total extermination and annihilation of all species but their own. Well, that is what this story will entail, showing us what may occur if 2 unstoppable forces were to clash. Within the endless reaches of outer space, a couple of transports could be seen traveling towards a planet with a brownish and orange hue. Within the first transport held scientists issued to be the ones to record their findings once the dormant marker had been activated, the properties, and how it would be able to help humanity find an everlasting resource. Among these men and women would be Dr. Iando, a Polish scientist who had served the sovereign colonies for quite some time now. This was to be his chance to impress the general, as never before had he been the one to lead an investigation such as this. This mission would take all of his experiences, his knowledge, his career would be on the line here. This was his chance to prove his worth, to prove that he was indeed worthy of being employed by the sovereign colonies. He would be accompanied by another doctor known as Hogan, an Irish scientist who had more experience within the colonies than Iando had, which would make him jealous of his position In his mind, it should have been him in charge. He should be the one to be considered due to having more experience as a capable scientist and had led others before. The second transport would be housing surveyors and geologists who had volunteered to be a part of the mission to aid the scientists, but to also see if the planet would hold anything that could be of further use to their faction. Back on the first transport, an announcement would be issued out that they would soon be reaching their destination, with an estimated time of 15 minutes remaining. Dr. Iando would say to Dr. Hogan in an eager tone, "Did you hear that, Hogan? 15 minutes until touchdown. We are so close. I can feel it." A rather annoyed Hogan would reply, "Yes, I suppose we are." Sensing dissent in the ranks, Iando would ask Hogan in a concerned voice, "Is everything alright, Hogan? I thought you always wanted a crack at researching the marker." Hogan replies, softly, "It's nothing." Iando at this time knows something is up, and he feels if he does not challenge the elder doctor now, he will only become more difficult to work around later on. "Are you sure there isn't something you'd like to get off your chest, Hogan?" Iando asks him. Hogan would just look at Iando, avoiding eye contact, before turning away. "There is nothing to worry about, my dear Hogan. If there is something you need to say, just say it. I will not judge you. I just don't want this to turn into something nasty," Iando says to Hogan, as he puts his hand on his shoulder in an effort to get him to open up to him. After a moment of pondering, with his eyes darting around the direction he was facing, he would finally cave in and say, "Alright then. I've spent the last 15 years employed by the colonies, and you'd think they at least throw me a goddamn bone. It's nothing against you, Iando, but I feel more suited for your position," he says with anger flaring out of his tone. Iando, feeling guilty over the promotion, would say to him, still holding his hand out but merely hovering over his shoulder now, with a few tremors rippling through across his wrist and all the way up to his fingertips. "You know, I didn't ask for this, but I assure you I will do the very best that I can. If not, then better." Hogan would turn around, asking, still angered, but with a lower tone, "I know you will, but I don't understand why the General would promote you when I've been here longer." Iando looks to him and says, "I don't know either, but one thing is for certain, and this is something to be thankful for. If I mess up, then it's the end of my career." Hogan would move past him towards the corridor, stopping to say, "You'd be thankful that's all the General does. The colonies aren't known for forgiveness, Iando. See you down there. I'm off to cool down before we head to the presentation planet side." Inside the other transport, the same announcement from earlier had been issued out, with two members of the surveyors looking over the report that had been issued to them. Daniel, an ex-soldier, had received orders to assist the station with whatever the needs be. Sitting across from him would be his assistant, Joseph. "You're gonna get starstruck if you aren't careful, Joseph," Daniel says to him in a playful and joking manner. Yeah, whatever you say, boss," Joseph replies, continuing to gaze out into the unknown. "What are you even looking for out there?" Daniel would ask, curious to hear what his assistant has to say. "Well, boss, I do have hopes and dreams of my own, you know," Joseph replies in a hopeful and dreamy tone. "Oh, really? Well, pray tell," Daniel asks him, curious to hear what his plans will be in his later life. "Nah, sir, you'll just laugh at me," Joseph remarks. Daniel gets out of his chair, shutting off the hologram, then walks over to Joseph, placing a firm grip on both of his shoulders, and asks again, but further adds, "Now, why would I do that to you? You have a dream? Let's hear it. You never know, we might have the same dream." Joseph turns to look at him, and says, "Well, yes, you know, sir,
My family was my everything. But ever since I got separated from them all those years ago, I've always had that feeling that my father is out there, looking for me. So what I want to do is I want to meet him halfway, building my own ship, soaring out into the stars myself with my own mission, surveying all kinds of worlds in hopes that I will see my family one more time. Even if it's just for a moment, Joseph says, sounding hopeful before getting teary. He would look at Daniel before looking back to the distant dots of light shining from the window. Wow, that's pretty deep for you, Daniel remarks to Joseph, with him replying, What do you mean for me? Daniel reaches over to find a magazine. Well, all you seem to do in your spare time is look at the pretty girls in this magazine. Joseph turns to say, well, we all need a hobby. The two would stare at each other, locking eyes, before letting out a burst of laughter. When all of a sudden, another announcement would rock the two vessels, informing the occupants to take their seats as they are about to breach the atmosphere of the planet. The scientists, surveyors, and other workers all take their seats and apply their guards to prevent injury upon re-entry to the planet. And so they blast through the thin layer of atmosphere, as if slicing through the air. The ships would be rocked by the turbulence, and heat would begin to build at a rapid pace at the forefront, with flames burning through the hull of the two vessels until they slowed their descent, with the onboard instruments allowing the dusty and cooler air to bring the temperature of the hull back down as they now fly towards the docking platforms. The transports soon descend vertically, slowly, with a combination of steam and smoke filling the platforms as they get closer and closer. A clanging can be heard as the transport shuttles land, with a ramp extending out, allowing the passengers access to the station. Dr. Iando and Hogan begin to walk out. Iando would shield his eyes from the blinding rays of the sun due to the thin atmospheric layer. Hogan looks around the landing platform, looking outward towards the environment. Couldn't they have chose a more luxurious planet? Hogan would say to himself, seeing only rocks and various mountains nearby, with no water at all, or at least natural water. Ianda would walk over to the edge of the platform, meeting Hogan before saying, "Everything alright, Hogan? You aren't still angry, are you?" Hogan would turn around, noticing Iando beside him. Oh, sorry, Iando, what were you saying? Ianda would look up to Hogan. "You're still annoyed, aren't you?" Hogan would turn to meet his gaze and tells him, "No, Iando, I'm fine. I was just thinking about this desolate planet. Not exactly a nice place to work." Iando would look out towards the plains of rock and uneven terrain for one moment, before saying, "Well, look on the bright side. At least nobody will think of looking for us out here. Think of it this way. This is a blessing in disguise, like a scientist's sanctuary." Hogan would let out a slight crackle as he says, "Sure, that's exactly what this is. Although, do you think anything could be here? The surveyors think they're going to find something out here, and to be honest, I don't think." Suddenly, a guard would interrupt the pair, who informs them that the presentation would begin soon, so they should pick up their things and head towards the main theater. They will be given their living quarters and workstations once the meeting has come to a close. The pair of scientists would thank the guard before departing, heading in towards the theater. Daniel and Joseph at this time would step off the shuttle and onto the adjacent platform, overlooking the wilderness. Daniel would show Joseph to their new working environment by pointing to a mountain. "You see there, Joseph? Something lies over there. I can feel it. You'll soon get that wish. Joseph would look slightly confused, but his attitude would soon change quickly upon hearing of his wish to find his distant relatives. "You think so? What exactly do you think we'll find out here, boss?" Daniel would look to him confidently. "I asked for a report of the wilderness for when we arrive. There is a team that has been studying this rock since the construction period." Joseph would eagerly say, "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go to our headquarters, sir." Daniel would walk over to a guard, asking for directions. Once they had gotten their heading, they begin moving towards the northern sector where the rest of the teams were waiting for them. Inside of the theater, a large crowd of researchers and scientists were all sitting like in a huge movie theater. At the front of the room was a few chairs and a podium with a microphone attached to it. A doctor known as Clifton would direct Hogan to his seat within the large gathering, while Iando was to sit on the stage beside the other leading doctors. "I swear, that should be me up there," Hogan would remark quietly to himself. Within a few moments, everyone that had been expected to arrive had taken their seats, and the lights would dim as a doctor would approach the podium with the opening speech beginning, welcoming all the researchers and scientists to the station, and would go over the major points of the presentation. Inside of the northern sector, Daniel and Joseph had made their way into the warehouse to talk with the other surveyors. A set of doors would open to reveal a group of people talking amongst themselves. Daniel would walk over to them and introduce himself along with Joseph. "Aha! You've made it, sir. I take it you traveled light and safe?" Gerald would ask. Daniel replies, "Yes." Gerald, isn't it?" "Yes, sir," Gerald says. "Alright then, with the pleasantries over and done with, let's get up to speed," Daniel says. "Yes, sir. Well, the operation has been going smoothly up to this point," Gerald would say as he looks over the monitors. "Only until now? What do you mean, Gerald? What's happened? Not another set of accidents?" Daniel would ask him. No, sir. No accidents. We sent a couple of men over the Barrens. They'd only been gone for a couple of hours. Then they told us about a cave system they had found, down a few slopes and into a ravine, and then they found something down there," Gerald explains. Daniel would look confused, but then in an intriguing voice he would ask, "Well, what happened next? You know I don't like cliffhangers." Gerald would look at the floor like he was ashamed of the answer he would give. After a moment, he would look up to Daniel and say, "The comms started failing. Their voices became like static and then nothing. We were trying to pinpoint their location and set up a search party, and that's when you turned up." Daniel could not believe this but would remain calm as to not escalate the situation. He would then start organizing the rest to try and find this cave entrance, as without the location, they might as well not bother. Inside of the theater, Iando would take to the podium to give a briefing of why they were there and the work they would be doing here. "Hello everyone. I now believe you have a slight understanding of why we are here on this rather desolate planet. When the black marker was found in 2214, it had defied the team's understanding of science. It had appeared to generate unlimited energy. Now, this is important as you know we are all under a crisis at the moment with our current history. With our resource-stricken situation, we are here to study the logs left behind by the team before us to understand what makes the marker tick, so that we may use the technology for our own means to propel humanity into the next stage of our destiny." An object would then be brought into view with a drape over it. Eander would give the assistants the cue to reveal their prize. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the next stage of science and possibly what will save the human race. The red marker. Or Marker 3A, as it is code-named. Eander would step down from the podium and allow the last person to speak, which would be the station manager. He would explain the working stations, the living quarters and offices, where they can go and which areas are off limits to the scientists and researchers. He would also tell them that their seats were not by chance. There was a reason to have them all seated where they were, and that was because of envelopes under the chairs, which would tell them their quarters, locations, their working departments, and who they report to. The people would look inside the envelopes to see a hologram pad explaining everything they need to know in greater detail. The manager would then dismiss them all and tell them to get some rest, as the future will await them in the morning. Eander would bid his farewells before heading towards his quarters, so that he may send his first report to the general of the colonies. A few hours later, inside of the warehouse, the day would turn to night, as Daniel and the others would be working tirelessly to locate the last known location of those two surveyors, until one of their drones would capture a recording of a set of glow sticks at the base of the set of mountains a few miles away from the station to the west. "So, that's where you are then," Daniel would say, believing they had finally made a breakthrough. "So, what are we going to do, sir?" Joseph would ask. Daniel would look to his clock to see that it is now 1 in the morning. He would then rub his eyes with one hand, and then would speak in a tired voice. We'll have to pick this up. We'll have to pick this up in the morning, Joseph. Everyone, well done for today. But for now, go get some rest. We have a lot to do tomorrow." Joseph would then say in a slightly frustrated voice, But sir, those men could be hurt for all we know, or trapped without food or water. We can't just stop now." Gerald would place his right hand over Joseph's shoulder and tell him, "They will be fine, Joseph. Look at the monitor. You don't think we would not be tracking their rigs, do you?" Joseph would then say, "If you track their rigs, then why couldn't you find them that way?" Gerald would turn to him and say, "Well, we tried, son. But the computers just couldn't find them." Daniel would then say, "Either too deep or..." Joseph would then interject, "Or they are being blocked by something." Gerald would then say, "Whichever it is, the main thing to be glad about is that the rig monitor says they are sound. Right, so no more talk about this until the morning. That way we'll be of better help to them. We can't help them while being fatigued ourselves. Otherwise we would be putting ourselves in danger, or them in greater peril," Daniel would explain to Joseph. He would then look away, but after a moment of staring down at the floor, he would look to Daniel with a nod and a smile before departing for the sleeping block. Inside of the station, everyone but two would be sound asleep, dreaming of what tomorrow will bring. Dr. Eando would be one of the two who would still be awake at this time. With the time being 2 in the morning, he was still writing out his first report. Altman's hasty expulsion from the project is unfortunate. His notes on the black marker appear incomplete, and our findings this far have been inconclusive. What notes we have recovered appear to be written in a code of his devising. It will be weeks before we can decipher them. His public outcry about the marker was a nuisance, perhaps more. This is a matter of security. The continued financial infusion over the years has been appreciated, and I'm pleased to share the results with you today. While some of our material fabrications are approximations of substances foreign to us, we have completed the internal workings of the device. One obvious difference between our replica and the original is the reddish hue. I assure you, this is a purely cosmetic difference, not indicative of a flaw. There. That should be plentiful, at least for now. I'm sure the General won't hold it against me. Although I must make sure to bring him more information next time. Oh, I should really get some sleep now. Big plans tomorrow, big plans. Eander would say to himself as he gets up and heads towards his bed, turning off his bedside lamp as he lays back, setting his alarm for 8 in the morning. 1 hour later, the other to fall asleep would be Joseph, who can't help but think of the suffering those men are facing down in those caves. He understands the perils and of what Daniel said to him, but he can't just lay there in his somewhat comfortable bunk bed. He would get out of bed quietly when he would hear a clanking noise outside, which had made his heart skip a few beats. He would get dressed and check out the noise. Peeking around the corner of the building, he would see a silhouette near the vehicle bay. The figure was alone, it would seem, hearing no noises other than the howling wind and the scuttering of the shadow. Joseph would soon see a glimpse of the person he was spying on as they had moved near a lamp. It was Gerald. Joseph would then move over to him and tap him on the shoulder, which had startled him as he jumped around in fright. "Joseph! Oh, gosh, don't do that! You nearly sent me into cardiac arrest. What are you doing here? You should be resting," Gerald would say as he held his chest, catching his breath. Joseph would then say in a smuggish tone, "I could say the same of you. Going for an early morning drive around the place, were we?" Gerald would look to him and say, "Look, I was going to find the cave system and mark it for tomorrow. That's it, that's all." Joseph says to him, "I could fetch Daniel now, you know. We could see how he feels all about this." Gerald would look to him, thinking of the trouble he would attract, but then asks, "What do you want?" "Let me come with you. I can't sleep, and I need to do something," Joseph said to Gerald, who after some thinking would say, "All right, you can come, but we are just marking, then returning. We aren't attempting a 2-man rescue operation alone." The two would prepare the shuttle and then set off towards the set of mountains towards the west. Moving over the barrens of uneven terrain and through the dust storms, seeing flashes of lightning crackling off in the distance, the two would be near the base of the mountains, when suddenly a burst of lightning spewed forth from the sky, striking the shuttle. No matter what they tried, the shuttle had lost all control, and like an EMP, the blast had short-circuited the systems. Nothing was responding, leaving them with no options but to brace for impact. Joseph would shut his eyes and await the inevitable crash. The shuttle would then collide with the uneven scars of rock and dust. The reinforced glass would shatter. Sparks could be seen everywhere. With every moment the shuttle traveled forward, it would get slower and slower. Unfortunately, intending this to be a quick trip, Gerald had added extra power to the engines, which was now to be their undoing. The shuttle would then smash straight through the rock wall, creating an even bigger opening than the smaller hole. Finally, it was over. The shuttle had stopped, but now it was Gerald and Joseph who were in need of saving. With the fuel leaking out of the cracks of the engines and sparks from the severed wires were making a fire a true possibility. Joseph would see Gerald as he awoke to hear the lightning crackling outside. However, he was too weak from the crash. He could do nothing but just sit there waiting for rescue to come. However, he could see Gerald had been thrown out of his seat and over the dash and out the window, with crimson blood leaking out from his stomach. Joseph would make a slow and weak mutter, calling to Gerald, when he would start to feel something tugging at the restraints. He would see a hand, but when he looked to see who was coming to his rescue, all he could see was a silhouette of a man in the flashes of light and dark. But he didn't say anything. The restraints would soon give away. The figure pulled him out of the chair as he fell unconscious, and his mind fell into a state of darkness. Gerald, on the other hand, would not be so lucky when the sparks would ignite the leaking fuel stream, which would follow the liquid back to its source, and an explosion would engulf the wreckage. The figure had saved Joseph and would take him deeper into the caves, where it would meet another, speaking the words, "A new tool for our master's work."
You did it, Yando. We have a live one.
Stop this, please!
All life on this planet will be subject to the law of the Daleks.
Leave no stone unturned.
Extermination.